Chapter 1. The Collapse. I had rehearsed the presentation so many times that the words felt carved into my bones. Months of preparation, nights spent hunched over spreadsheets until the numbers blurred, weekends lost to strategy sessions and market reports. All of it came down to this morning. The executive board, the department heads, the promotion I'd chased for 3 years, everything waited on the other side of this conference room. I straightened my tie in the glass door before entering, inhaling deeply. "You've got this," I told myself, even though a strange tightness had been lingering in my chest since dawn. Probably nerves. Nothing more. As soon as I stepped inside, light chatter died down. Faces turned toward me. My boss, Miriam, gave me an encouraging nod from the front row. "Big day," she whispered as I passed. "Let's hope it's a good one," I whispered back, forcing a smile. The projector hummed to life, casting the opening slide across the wall. Quarterly expansion strategy and forecast. My name gleamed beneath it. I set my notes on the lectern, though I hardly needed them. Muscle memory was supposed to guide me. "Good morning, everyone," I began, steady and practiced. "Thank you for giving me your time today. I'm excited to walk you through the data behind our projected expansion," but halfway through the second slide, a strange wave rolled through me. A pressure, sharp and crushing, seized my chest. I paused, gripping the sides of the lectern. The room seemed to tilt, the edges of the projection screen warping like melting plastic. "You okay?" someone whispered from the front row. Just a moment," I said, swallowing hard. My heart thudded violently. A cold sheen of sweat broke over my forehead. I blinked rapidly, but the words on the slide blurred, then doubled. A flare of pain shot down my arm. My breath hitched into a shallow, frantic stutter. Something was very, very wrong. "Do you need water?" Miriam asked, already half rising from her chair. Before I could answer, before I could force myself to say yes or help or call someone, the floor tilted violently beneath me. My vision tunneled. The last thing I heard was someone shouting my name. Then everything went black. When awareness returned, sound came first. "Stay with us. Stay with us. He's crashing oxygen." I wasn't sure if my eyes were open or closed. Light flickered, too bright, like flashes of white fire behind my eyelids. My body felt like a sack of wet sand, heavy and unresponsive. A sharp chemical scent, antiseptic, alcohol wipes filled the air. I tried to speak. The sound that escaped my throat was barely a groan. "He's coming around," a voice said, female, calm but tense. "Sir, can you hear me?" I forced my eyes open. The ceiling above me wasn't the sleek, polished wood of the conference room. It was fluorescent white, punctuated with harsh squares of light. 2 EMTs hovered over me in the back of an ambulance, one adjusting wires stuck to my chest, the other securing an oxygen mask over my face. "Wah!" My voice broke. The EMT leaned closer. "You collapsed at work," he explained. "Chest pain, loss of consciousness. We're taking you to Memorial Hospital. Just try to breathe normally for me. Chest pain, collapse, hospital." The words made no sense, and yet my body understood them before my mind did. Panic spiked through me. "My wife, Zoe, call Zoe." I rasped, trying to reach for my pocket. "Phone's with your belongings," the EMT said. "We'll contact her as soon as we stabilize you." The pain in my chest surged again, and everything blurred. The next clear moment was the hospital intake. Bright lights, cold air, nurses moving around me with determined speed. "BP 180 over 110. He's hypertensive," someone said. "Get cardiology on standby." "Mr. Walker, can you hear me?" A doctor leaned over me, her eyes sharp, assessing. "Yes," I whispered, though the word barely formed. "You're experiencing signs of severe cardiac distress. Your blood work and EKG suggest a major blockage. We need to prep you for emergency surgery immediately." My heart stuttered at her words, ironically, not the part of me that needed to be stuttering. "Surgery," I whispered. "Now." "Yes, now," she said firmly. "You don't have time to wait." Fear washed over me in a cold wave. Surgery, emergency, blockage, words that felt like death sentences. "My wife," I said again, more urgently this time. "You need to call my wife. Please call Zoe. She should be here." The doctor nodded toward nurse. Contact his emergency contact. The nurse took my chart and stepped out of the room. I waited, watching the door through the haze, waiting for her to walk back in and say, "She's on her way," waiting to hear Zoe's voice, waiting for anything. But minutes passed. 10, 15. The doctor returned with a softened expression. "Still no answer?" she asked the nurse quietly. The nurse shook her head, went straight to voicemail. They didn't think I heard them. I heard every word. "No." I croaked, forcing myself upright, even as pain lanced through my chest. "Try again, please," she'll answer. "Mr. Walker, lie back," the doctor said, guiding me down. "We'll keep trying." But I recognized the tone. The type of tone meant to comfort the dying. The type that said, "We'll try, but don't hope." More nurses came. For lines were inserted. Machines beeped in frantic rhythm. A cold antiseptic wipe grazed my side as they prepared to place pads for defibrillation just in case. My throat tightened, not from fear of dying, but from something far more painful. Zoe wasn't answering. My wife wasn't answering. And somewhere inside me, beneath the terror and pain, a familiar ache opened like an old wound. Of course, she's not answering. This is who she is. This is who she's always been. Second priority. Third, last. I fought the tears burning behind my eyes because crying seemed impossible when a machine was warning I was in danger of flatlining. A nurse touched my shoulder gently. "We'll try her again before we take you into surgery." I nodded, though the gesture barely moved my head. The world blurred again. Pain, alarms, voices. The doctor's tone turned urgent. "Blockage is over 90%. Prep the ER. I want to be awake until until Zoe." My words dissolved as they placed an oxygen mask back over my face. "Please," I whispered into the mask, but I wasn't sure anyone heard me. My last clear sight before they wheeled me toward the operating room was the nurse stepping into the hallway again, phone to her ear, listening to the same unanswered ring. And in that hollow sound, that endless ringing, I realized the truth I hadn't wanted to face. I could be dying, and Zoe still wouldn't pick up. Chapter 2, Alone in ICU. The first sensation that registered was the rhythmic hiss-click of a machine. Then a dull, throbbing ache in my chest. Then the strange, suffocating heaviness of sleep that wasn't quite sleep, like trying to surface through thick, dark water. I opened my eyes. A dim light glowed in the corner, casting stretched shadows across the ICU room. Plastic tubes ran from my arms to hanging bags of clear liquid. Monitors flickered beside me, with jagged lines tracking my heartbeat. My throat was dry, raw like I'd swallowed sand. But none of that mattered. The first thing I looked for was her. The chair beside my bed, simple, gray, uncomfortable looking, stood empty. Its cushion dent-free. No blanket draped over the arm. No coffee cup on the floor. No handbag. No phone. Just silence. Just emptiness. My pulse quickened on the monitor, beeping faster, louder. "Easy," a soft voice said. A nurse, mid-30s, tired eyes, kind smile, stepped in, adjusting one of the 4 lines. "You're awake. That's good. Try not to move too much." I swallowed, winced, and croaked out, "How long?" "You've been out for a few hours," she said. "The surgery went well. Textbook, actually. You're stable." Did my voice cracked? Did my wife come? Something flickered in her expression. Sympathy, maybe, or a quick, careful neutrality nurses practice for moments exactly like this. "No," she said gently. "There's been no visitors yet." My stomach dropped. Yet. Such a simple word. Such a heavy blade. "And calls?" I asked. "Messages? Anything from her?" She hesitated, and that single hesitation cut deeper than any scalpel. "We tried contacting her several times before your surgery," she said. But she didn't answer. I closed my eyes. The room seemed to shrink around me, pressing close, suffocating. Of course she hadn't answered. Of course the chair was empty. It suddenly felt like all the air had turned thick, as if I wasn't breathing oxygen, but disappointment. The nurse adjusted the blankets around me. "I can get you some iced chips if your throat hurts." "I'm fine," I whispered, though the edges of my voice shook. "You're not," she said quietly, "but that's okay. You just been through a lot." She slipped out of the room, leaving me alone again with the steady, relentless beeping of the monitors. The sound felt too loud, too intimate, like the machine was mocking me. Look how close you came. Look who didn't show up. I stared at the chair until my vision blurred. Zoe should have been there. She should have been the first face I saw when I opened my eyes. She should have been holding my hand. But she wasn't here. She wasn't even calling. My phone sat on a rolling table beside the bed, screen dark. I reached for it slowly, careful not to pull at the wires in my arm. When I finally got hold of it, I pressed the power button. The lock screen lit up. No notifications. No messages. No missed calls. Nothing. Just a blank screen where her name should have been. My throat closed again, this time not from dryness. I set the phone down, covered my eyes with my arm, and breathed through the heavy, sinking feeling in my chest. The door opened quietly. Mr. Walker? The same nurse stepped in, holding a small device in her hand. You have a voicemail? We checked your phone when you were admitted. Your emergency contact is your wife, so we listened to see if it was something urgent. A voicemail. From Zoe. She offered me the phone. I took it with trembling fingers. She left it about an hour after you were brought in, the nurse added. I thought, maybe you'd want to hear it. Then she stepped back, giving me space. I pressed play. Zoe's voice filled the room, bright and annoyed, like she was calling from the middle of an errand, not from a moment where her husband was fighting for his life. Hey, I saw I missed some calls from the hospital. Sorry, babe, I couldn't answer. Dolly is having a meltdown. Apparently the painters brought eucalyptus instead of sage, and she's freaking out. The voicemail continued as if she were discussing lunch plans. She's crying because the vibe is ruined, whatever that means. I had to stay and handle it, because she's making a scene. Anyway, I'll check in with you later, okay? Just text me if it's important. The message ended with a casual beep. The silence afterward was deafening. I stared at the phone in my hand, unable to breathe for a moment. The nurse shifted slightly, like she didn't know whether she should leave or stay. I played the voicemail again, and again. Each time, the words hit harder. Dolly is having a meltdown. Wrong shade of green. I had to stay and handle it. Text me if it's important. If it's important. I was in an ICU bed with a 90% blockage removed from my heart, and she was dealing with a color swatch crisis. A laugh tore from my throat. Not a real laugh. Not one with humor. It was ugly, defeated, hollow. Wrong shade of green, I whispered, shaking my head. Eucalyptus, instead of sage. I leaned back against the pillow, staring up at the ceiling tiles as if they held answers. The nurse finally broke the silence. I'm sorry. Don't be, I said, though my voice cracked in the middle. It's not your fault, I couldn't finish the sentence. Because what word was big enough? What word was accurate enough? Self-absorbed? Neglectful? Emotionally absent? Or maybe just unavailable? She had always been unavailable. Birthdays, anniversaries, work events, moments that mattered to me always seemed to fall second to her sister's crises, her mother's opinions, her friend's drama, her social calendar. I just never thought I'd be second to a paint color. The nurse gently squeezed my arm. If you need anything at all, press the call button. She left me again. I picked up the phone with trembling fingers and replayed the voicemail for the fourth time. Each word seemed to carve a new wound. This wasn't a one-off mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't even cruelty. No, it was clarity. For the first time, stripped bare in this cold ICU room, with tubes in my arm, a scar forming on my chest, and a heart that had literally almost stopped beating, I finally saw my marriage for what it had really been. This wasn't just neglect. It was the summary of our entire relationship. And something inside me broke open. Chapter 3, The Lawyer in the ICU. Morning seeped slowly into the ICU, pale and indifferent, washing the room in a cold gray glow. I hadn't slept much. The steady machine beeps punctuated the silence. But it wasn't the noise that kept me awake. It was the voicemail I kept replaying in my head. Eucalyptus instead of sage. She's making a scene. Text me if it's important. My chest ached, and not just from the incision. I stared at the ceiling until my vision blurred. Something inside me had shifted overnight. Something fundamental. I wasn't even sure I could name it. Anger, maybe. Or grief. or the realization that I had been clinging to a marriage built on the illusion of partnership. The door creaked open, and a nurse carried in a tray with a small cup of ice chips. "You should try to rest," she said softly, noticing my eyes were still open. "Your vitals are good, but your stress levels are very high." I huffed out a hollow laugh. Hard not to be stressed when your wife can't tell the difference between a heart attack and a pain emergency. The nurse gave me a sympathetic look, but didn't comment. "Do you need anything?" "Yes, but not from her." "Could I have my phone?" I asked. "Of course." She retrieved it from the rolling table and handed it to me. "Try not to overexert yourself." "I'll try." I wouldn't succeed. As soon as she left, I unlocked the phone. Still no messages from Zoe. Not a single one. That hollow space inside me widened. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed, Gabriel Hayes. Friend, college roommate, the person who had stood beside me as best man at my wedding, and the only attorney I trusted implicitly. I hesitated for a moment, thumb hovering over the call button. Was I really going to do this? Yes. I already knew the answer. I had known it since the exact moment I woke up alone after a near-death experience and found no trace of Zoe's concern. I tapped the name. The phone rang once. "Dude." Gabriel's voice came through immediately, groggy, thick with sleep. "It's 7 in the morning. You better be dying or I whispered. A beat of stunned silence. Then Gabriel's tone changed entirely. "What happened?" I explained everything collapsing at work, the surgery, the voicemail, the empty chair, the realization that this wasn't new neglect. It was a pattern etched into the foundation of my marriage. Gabriel didn't interrupt. Not once. I heard him breathing on the other end, quiet but steady, absorbing every detail. When I finished, my voice cracked. "I need you here. You want legal counseling?" he said softly. Not a question, an understanding. I said, swallowing hard, "to stop giving my life to someone who can't bother picking up the phone." A slow exhale came through the line. "I'll be there in an hour." He arrived in 40 minutes. The door swung open, and Gabriel stepped inside wearing jeans, a wrinkled button-down, and the expression of someone ready to fight the world on my behalf. "Jesus," he muttered when he saw me. "You look like crap." "I feel worse." He set a thick leather briefcase on the counter. The sound echoed in the small room like a gavel. "Before we start," he said, pulling a chair beside the bed, "I want you to be sure. Not angry. Not impulsive. Sure." I looked him dead in the eyes. "She didn't come, Gabe. I almost died, and she didn't come." He inhaled sharply, nodding once. "Then we begin." He opened the briefcase and took out a stack of documents neatly clipped together. "First," he said, flipping one over, "we revoke Zoe's power of attorney. Effective immediately." I took the pen he offered. My hands trembled as I signed my name. It felt like cutting a chain. "Next," Gabriel said, pulling out the next set, "we remove her as beneficiary on your life insurance and retirement accounts." A weight pressed down on my chest, not from surgery but from grief. She used to joke about how she'd spend the payout. "Yeah, well," he said, "she won't be spending anything from you ever again." I signed. Another chain cut. "Then," Gabriel continued, "we remove her name from the joint bank accounts. Freeze the card linked to your primary. I'll file the notice today." A small, humorless smile touched my lips. "She's going to notice." "Good," he said. "Let her notice." I signed again. My hand hurt, but I didn't stop. The next document had a different weight to it. A will, my revised one. The paper looked heavier than the others, as if it understood its importance. "I left the beneficiaries blank until you decide," Gabriel said quietly. "But this ensures she gets nothing." I stared at the paper. Zoe and I had built the life reflected in those lines. Every asset, every investment, every property, every plan for a future she clearly didn't care about nearly as much as I did. I signed my name in a shaky scrawl. For the first time, I exhaled without feeling like something was crushing my chest. Gabriel gathered the papers, tapped them neatly into alignment, then slid them back into the briefcase. "You okay?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "No," he sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, I didn't think you would be." For a moment, silence filled the room. Not awkward, just heavy with everything we didn't have words for. It feels wrong, I admitted quietly. It is wrong, he agreed. It's grief. You didn't just lose a wife. You lost the person you thought she was. His words hit like a punch. I swallowed hard. Then why do I feel relieved? Because, he said, leaning forward, you finally chose yourself. After years of choosing her. I blinked, my throat tightening. She should have been here. She should have, he echoed. But she wasn't. The monitor beeped steadily beside me. A strange reminder that I was alive. Alive enough to make decisions I'd been too afraid to make before. Gabriel clasped my shoulder gently. I'm proud of you, man. This is the hardest part. I looked down at the empty visitor's chair. No, I whispered. The hardest part was waking up and seeing that seat empty. Grief washed through me like cold water. But beneath it, warm, faint but growing, was something else. Relief. For the first time in years, I felt it. A quiet, painful, honest relief. Chapter 4. The Group Chat Explosion. The heart monitor ticked in slow, steady beeps, far steadier than my breathing. The ICU room was dim. The curtains pulled halfway, closed, machines humming like distant machinery in a factory. I stared at the ceiling, the weight of the blankets heavy over my legs, the oxygen tube itching against my nose. Still no call from Zoe. No text. No voicemail. No, hey, are you alive? Just silence. A silence so loud the beeping monitors felt like sirens. My phone sat on the rolling tray beside the bed. I finally reached for it, wincing as the movement tugged at the 4 in my arm. Notifications lit up the screen. None for her, but one at the very bottom, finally from Zoe, time-stamped 38 minutes ago. Zoe. Finally resolved. The painter mixed up the colors, but we fixed it. Dahlia's calm now. A paint problem. A paint color problem. I stared at the message, so long my vision blurred. My thumb hovered over the screen, shaking slightly, the pulse monitor on my finger ticking faster. That's what my wife chose over me. Eucalyptus instead of sage. I swallowed hard, chest tightening, not the dangerous kind this time, but the kind that comes from something breaking inside. The nurse came in to check my vitals. Her eyes softened. Still nothing from your wife? I shook my head. She's dealing with paint. The nurse paused, her hand tightening on the chart. I'm sorry, she whispered. Her pity stung more than anything. When she left, I stared at the empty visitor's chair again, the chair that should have held Zoe, her purse, her anxious eyes, her cold hands wrapped around mine. Instead, it held a neatly folded hospital blanket and a laminated pamphlet about surgical recovery. My chest rose and fell, slow at first, then faster. My breathing felt jagged, and not because of the surgery. Enough. I had been silent for years. I had played the understanding husband, the patient partner, the man who never complained. The man whose needs always took a back seat to Zoe's sister's moods, Zoe's shopping weekends, Zoe's emergencies that are never emergencies. I opened the family group chat. My thumb hovered. I could hear Gabriel's voice in my head. You have to protect yourself, man. Silence only lets them twist things later. My heart hammered, and then I typed. Slowly, deliberately, fury sharp and cold. I'm in the ICU recovering from emergency heart surgery. I hit send. Instantly, 3 dots popped up. Then the explosion began. Dahlia, seriously? Right now? Do you have any idea what Zoe has been dealing with today? Zoe's mother. You always pick the worst possible times to create drama. Create drama, right? A 90% blockage and a collapsed artery. So dramatic. Zoe's cousin Mira. ICU doesn't mean critical. My neighbor was in ICU for dehydration once. My jaw clenched. Unbelievable, I muttered aloud. The monitor beside me beeped faster. More messages poured in. Dahlia, some of us had real emergencies today. You could at least be supportive instead of making everything about you. Real emergencies. A paint shade. Another bubble appeared. Zoe typing. Finally, I stared at the dots moving, waiting for something, anything that sounded like remorse or concern or humanity. Then the dots disappeared. Nothing. I let out a short, humorless laugh. That was the moment the nurse returned to adjust my 4. She paused when she saw my expression. Are you okay? Your heart rate is spiking. Family, I said hoarsely. Apparently my surgery is drama. She blew out a slow breath. Sometimes the hardest part isn't the illness. It's who shows up or doesn't. I nodded, throat tight. When she left, my phone vibrated with another message. Not from Zoe or her family this time. Gabriel. Saw the group chat. You need to document everything. These people will spin a narrative. He was right. I typed back with shaky fingers. Me, what do you suggest? His reply came fast. Gabriel, share the truth publicly. Neutral, non-confrontational, just facts. For your safety and reputation. I stared at the message for a long moment. Posting on social media felt dramatic. Like something Zoe would accuse me of, except Zoe couldn't accuse me of anything if she wasn't even calling to check if I was alive. I opened Instagram. My camera feed popped up, already containing the photo the nurse had taken earlier for documentation. Me in the ICU bed. Tubes. For lines. Monitors. Pale, exhausted, alive by a margin so thin it scared me to think about it. I studied the photo. I looked fragile. Human. Broken in ways I had never admitted. My hands trembled as I selected it. I didn't add a caption. Didn't explain. Didn't attack. Just the image. Just the truth. I hit post. The little spinning wheel rotated for a moment before confirming the upload. There. Done. I exhaled slowly, a painful breath that scraped my throat. Within seconds, notifications started appearing, likes, shocked emoji reactions, messages from coworkers, friends, neighbors. People I hadn't spoken to in months were asking, "What happened? Are you okay? Do you need anything?" Strangers had more compassion than my own wife. I set the phone down, letting it buzz uselessly on the tray. The room felt colder now, the quiet more suffocating. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, letting the reality sink in. I almost died today, and the woman who promised to love me in sickness and in health was too busy arguing about shades of green. My eyes burned, but no tears came. Not yet, just a dull ache spreading through my chest, emotional, not physical. The ICU lights flickered softly as the night shift settled in. Machines hummed. The hallway outside echoed with the distant beeping of other patients fighting their own battles. And I lay there alone in a hospital bed, my life cracked open like a wound finally exposed to air. Still no call from Zoe. Still no message. Still nothing. The chapter of my life where I kept quiet was over. But for now, the room remained silent, my phone buzzing in the darkness, the truth laid bare for the world to see. Chapter 5. Zoe finally shows up. I had stopped counting the hours somewhere between the second and third night. ICU time moved differently, slower, heavier, as if every minute had weight. Nurses came and went, checking monitors, adjusting 4 lines, whispering soft encouragement. But the chair beside my bed remained empty. 3 days, 72 hours, long enough to heal from anesthesia, short enough for fresh resentment to grow like wildfire. By the morning of the 3rd day, I had given up expecting anything from Zoe. I had rehearsed every possible excuse she might have, sick, busy, overwhelmed, none of which matched the reality. She simply chose not to care. So when the door finally swung open, I didn't look up at first. I thought it was another nurse. But then I heard the sharp staccato of heels against the linoleum floor. Heels. In the ICU. My head lifted. There she was. Zoe stood in the doorway wearing a fitted cream dress, gold earrings, hair perfectly curled, lipstick flawlessly applied. She looked like she was heading to brunch, not visiting her husband who had nearly died. She didn't rush to me. She didn't gasp or cry, or even soften. She sighed, loudly. "There you are," she said, tossing her designer purse onto the visitor's chair as if it offended her. "Do you have any idea what kind of week I've had?" I stared at her, unable to speak at first. My throat felt tight, dry. Finally, I managed a week. I had emergency heart surgery, Zoe. She rolled her eyes slightly. So small a gesture, but enough to punch the air from my lungs. Yes, I know. I'm here, aren't I?" 3 days later. She strutted closer, arms crossed. "You have no idea what Dahlia put me through." The painter brought eucalyptus instead of sage. Her entire wall looked like some sickly mint toothpaste. She was hysterical, screaming, crying, completely falling apart. I blinked at her. So you ignored the hospital calls. I didn't ignore them, she snapped, offended. I just couldn't deal with two emergencies at once. Two. My voice cracked with disbelief. One was your sister's paint, Zoe. The other was your husband collapsing at work. That paint was a big deal, she fired back. Dahlia had been planning that room for months. Emotional distress is still distress. I stared at her, chest tightening, not from the surgery this time. You're unbelievable, I whispered. She waved her hand dismissively. Don't be dramatic. You always do this. Anytime my family needs something, you act like I'm abandoning you. Her tone sharpened. Someone has to manage them. I let out a broken laugh. And that someone isn't your husband. Got it. Zoe huffed, irritated. Look, I'm here now. That's what matters. She glanced around the room, wrinkling her nose like the antiseptic smell offended her. How long do you plan on staying here anyway? This place is depressing. The machine beside me beeped faster. I opened my mouth, but the door opened again. Gabriel stepped inside. Thank God. He wore a charcoal suit and carried a thick manila folder. His expression was calm, but his eyes flicked over Zoe with quiet tension, as if assessing a storm. Oh, great, Zoe muttered under her breath. What is he doing here? Gabriel nodded politely. Zoe. She lifted her chin. If this is about the group chat, everyone overreacted. They always take things so personally. Gabriel didn't reply. He walked to my bedside, placed a steadying hand on the rail, then turned toward her. I'm here because your husband asked me to be, he said evenly. And because there are things you need to see. He opened the folder and withdrew several documents. Zoe frowned. What is that? Legal paperwork, he said. Official as of yesterday. She stepped closer, suspicion tightening her features. What kind of paperwork? Gabriel handed her the first document. She glanced down, reading the header aloud. Revocation of power of attorney. Her voice faltered. She flipped to the next page. Removal of beneficiary status? Removal from joint accounts? Property rights? Wait, what? Her eyes shot up, wide and furious. You did this? While you were in here? She jabbed a finger toward the machines surrounding me. Are you insane? You're recovering from surgery and you're making legal decisions? I met her gaze evenly. Yes. You can't be serious, she whispered, color draining from her face. You're punishing me for one mistake. One. The words scraped my throat. 3 days, Zoe. 3 days you didn't come. 3 days I wondered why my wife didn't care if I lived or died. She shook her head, backing away. No, you're overreacting. You're not thinking clearly. Gabriel spoke quietly. He was thinking more clearly than ever. Zoe glared at him. Stay out of this. This is between us. No, I said. Not anymore. She blinked at me, tears filling her eyes, though I couldn't tell if they were real or strategic. I love you, she whispered. You know that. I was overwhelmed. I was trying to handle everything. You can't just erase me from your life because I had to be there for my sister. I exhaled slowly. Being there for your sister wasn't the problem. Choosing her paint over my life was. You're exaggerating. No one was going to die. I almost did. She froze, lips parting. The beeping in the room slowed again, syncing with my breath. I spoke quietly, firmly, every word final. I'm done bleeding for this. The silence that followed was sharp, electric. Zoe's face twisted, rage, hurt, disbelief, all tangled into something ugly. She snatched her purse from the chair, nearly knocking it over. Fine, she shouted. If you want to throw away our marriage over this, go ahead. I'm not staying here to be insulted. She spun on her heel, hair whipping behind her, heels clacking violently against the floor. A nurse startled as Zoe shoved past her and stormed down the hallway, her voice echoing until it faded into the distance. The door swung shut. Softer now. Quieter. Gabriel stood there, hands in his pockets, watching the closed door. I lay back against the pillows, exhausted, drained, but lighter than I had felt in years. The storm had come and gone, and I hadn't died this time. Chapter 6, The Cafeteria Confrontation. The cafeteria was the only place in the hospital where the silence didn't feel sacred. Instead, it felt practical, trays clattering, coffee machines humming, the low murmur of tired families discussing test results and visiting hours. I had come here for 10 minutes of air, not filtered through ICU machinery. Gabriel had gone to make a call, giving me space. I sat alone at a corner table, slowly stirring a cup of coffee I had no intention of drinking. My chest still ached from the surgery, but it was a distant pain, secondary to everything else clawing for attention. I didn't hear them approach. I felt them, the sudden cold drop in the atmosphere, the unmistakable click of heels, a loud, angry huff. I looked up. Zoe and Dahlia. Zoe stood with her arms folded, chin up, eyes swollen from crying or rage. I couldn't tell which. Beside her was Dahlia, clutching a plastic cup of iced coffee like it was a weapon. Her expression was already twisted with hostility, as though she had been rehearsing this confrontation the entire walk here. "There he is," Dahlia announced loudly, drawing the attention of several nearby tables. Acting like the victim again, Zoe shifted uncomfortably. "We need to talk," she said, though her tone made it clear she didn't want to. "You didn't have to embarrass me like that." I raised my brows. "Embarrass you?" Dahlia stepped forward aggressively. "Yes, embarrass her. You know exactly what you did, blasting our personal business online, making her look like some heartless monster. She didn't come to the hospital for 3 days," I said calmly. "That's not an image problem. That's a reality problem." Dahlia scoffed, loud and sharp. "Please, you're such a drama queen. People collapse all the time. It doesn't mean the world has to stop spinning." My jaw tightened. I had a 90% arterial blockage. I required emergency heart surgery. Dahlia waved her hand. "And you lived. So clearly it wasn't that dire." Several people nearby looked up at that. Even strangers seemed stunned by her lack of empathy. Zoe murmured, "Dahlia, maybe no." Dahlia snapped. "Someone has to say it." She pointed at me. "You are blowing everything out of proportion to make Zoe feel guilty. And for what? So you can look like some wounded husband while we deal with actual trauma." "Actual trauma?" I repeated slowly. "You mean the paint?" "Yes, the paint," she exploded. "That room was supposed to soothe my anxiety. Sage is calming for my nervous system. Eucalyptus isn't. They're completely different energy profiles. You think that doesn't matter?" I stared at her, stunned. Almost died. My heart almost stopped. "And you're talking to me about energy profiles?" Zoe grabbed Dahlia's arm. "Stop. Just please stop." But Dahlia shook her off and leaned toward me, voice rising. "You always make everything about you. Zoe's been carrying this family for years. And the one time we need her, you guilt trip her like she abandoned a child on the sidewalk." I looked down at my hands, then back up at them. "Do you know what the nurse said?" I asked quietly. "She told me to call loved ones. Told me to make sure I didn't leave anything unsaid." Zoe swallowed hard. I continued. "And while I was doing that, while I was lying in a hospital bed wondering if I'd ever wake up, you were screaming about sage paint." Dahlia's face twisted. "You know what to throw that in my face. My meltdown was valid." I met her fury with calm. "Your meltdown was loud. That doesn't make it important." She froze. Her grip on the iced coffee tightened. Zoe whispered, "Dahlia, don't." But it was too late. With a sudden, violent motion, Dahlia slung her cup across the table. The ice-cold liquid splashed onto my hospital gown, the table, even the floor. The shock of cold sent a jolt at my torso. A collective gasp erupted from the surrounding tables. "What the hell?" I recoiled, chest stinging from the temperature. 2 nurses nearby shot to their feet. Gabriel appeared out of nowhere, having clearly witnessed the end of the exchange. His face went hard, lawyer hard. A security guard rushed over, hand on his belt. "Ma'am, you need to come with me right now." Dahlia pointed at me wildly. "He provoked me. He's attacking us." No one is attacking you," Gabriel snapped. "But you just assaulted a post-op cardiac patient." The guard stepped in. "Ma'am, now." Dahlia jerked her arm away, screaming, "This whole family is ungrateful. You deserve everything you get." They escorted her out while she continued her tirade, her voice fading down the hallway. Silence settled over the cafeteria again, thick and suffocating. Zoe stood frozen, trembling, eyes wide with humiliation. I didn't know she would do that. I didn't know. Gabriel stepped beside me, pulling a small towel from his briefcase. He always carried everything, and handed it to me to dab my gown. Then, with quiet precision, he opened a folder and extended 2 papers toward Zoe. She looked at them with confusion, then dread. "What is this?" she whispered. "The first," Gabriel said, tapping the top page, "is a restraining order against your sister. Effective immediately." Zoe paled. "A restraining order? Against Dahlia?" "No, you can't. She didn't mean." "She threw a drink on my client," Gabriel said sharply. "A patient recovering from heart surgery. That is grounds." Zoe's lips trembled as she looked at the second document. "And this one?" "That," Gabriel said, voice gentler but firm, "is notice of pending divorce proceedings." Her face collapsed. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no, please. You can't do this. We just need to talk. We can fix this. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Tears streamed down her cheeks now, real ones, maybe, but none of it moved anything inside me. I stared at her, empty, hollow, done. She waited for me to speak. I didn't. Her knees buckled slightly, and she caught herself on the back of a chair. "Please," she choked. "Say something. Please." But I felt nothing. No anger. No grief. No nostalgia. Just a void where love used to be. And that hurt her more than anything I could have said. Chapter 7. Dismantling the life she enjoyed. The day I was discharged from the hospital, the sun was too bright. The air too fresh. The world too normal for someone who had nearly died. But I walked out of that ICU with a strange clarity. A clarity that didn't come from rage, though I had enough reasons for it. It came from survival. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about protecting Zoe's feelings. I was thinking about protecting my life. Gabriel drove me home, insisting I shouldn't be behind the wheel yet. Every bump in the road reminded me my chest had been opened, but the ache was nothing compared to what I returned to. Our house was spotless. Too spotless. Zoe's way of pretending everything was fine. She came rushing to the door the moment she heard the engine. Her mascara was smeared, her hair messy, like she'd been pacing for hours. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, reaching for me. "Baby, I've been so worried." I stepped back, avoiding her hands. Her face crumpled at that. Gabriel gave me a look. "You okay?" I nodded once. Zoe swallowed. "We can fix this. I just want us back. Please." But I didn't answer. I walked past her, through the living room, down the hall, into the bedroom. She followed closely, speaking through tears. "I made a mistake. A stupid one. But it was just one. One mistake." I opened the closet. Half of it was hers. Designer dresses, heels, bags that cost more than some people's rent. I started pulling things out. Folded them. Stacked them. Dropped them into cardboard boxes I'd asked Gabriel to bring. Zoe froze in the doorway. What are you doing?" "Packing your things," I said without looking up. She stumbled forward. Wait. This is insane. Talk to me." But I didn't. Not yet. I moved methodically. Jackets. Blouses. Jewelry trays. Scarves. The sound of metal hangers scraping the rod filled the room. A cold, scraping soundtrack to the end of something that should have ended years ago. Finally, when the closet was half empty, I turned to her. "This isn't about one mistake, Zoe. It never was." She shook her head violently. No, you don't get to do this. I stood by you for years. I supported you. You supported me." I cut in. "Zoe, you weren't there when I needed you most. Not emotionally. Not physically. Not once." "That's not fair," she whispered, but her voice was small. "Fair?" I echoed. "You want to talk about fair?" I stepped past her and walked to the home office. She followed helplessly. There on my desk were the documents Gabriel had prepared. I pulled the first one from the stack. "First," I said calmly, "the beach house." Zoe blinked. "What about it?" "It's sold." Her mouth dropped open. "Sold? You sold the beach house?" "Without telling me. That was my safe place. My getaway." I met her eyes. "It was purchased with my inheritance. Not ours. And I'm cashing it out." I moved to the next document. "In the car," I continued. "The Audi." Her voice rose. No, 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 I need that car. I have appointments. I have errands. The lease is canceled, I said. As of this morning. Are you trying to ruin my life? She cried. No, I said. I'm removing myself from the part of it that ruined mine. Her breath hitched. She leaned on the doorway for support. I opened my banking app. Right in front of her. One by one, I pulled up her joint accounts. She stepped closer, panic cracking her voice. Please don't. I pressed the button. Close account. Her breath caught. Stop it, she yelled. You're acting like a child. No, I said. I'm acting like someone who finally woke up. Next, I opened the credit card portal. Zoe lunged forward. Wait. At least talk to me before you. I hit the red button. Cancel card. Her card. Her limit. Her access. She looked like I'd slapped her. This is insane, she whispered. I've never seen you like this. You're being cruel. I stared at her. Cruel. She nodded wildly. Yes. You're punishing me for something that wasn't even that big a deal. My jaw clenched. I had heart surgery, Zoe. I know, she cried. And I said I was sorry. What more do you want? I didn't respond. I was already dialing. The spa answered on the second ring. Hi, I said. I'd like to cancel my wife's membership. Zoe gasped like she'd been stabbed. Please, please, don't do this. That's my only escape. I ended the call, then disconnected her from the insurance plan, removed her emergency access, shut down the streaming accounts she used more than I ever did, all of it in front of her, so she couldn't claim ignorance later. She started sobbing, loud, desperate sobs. You're destroying everything, she screamed. Everything we built. I set my phone down. We didn't build anything, I said. I built. You enjoyed. Her hands shook as she reached for me. Please, just talk to me. I made one bad choice. One. You can't end everything over that. I finally looked at her, really looked at her. At the tears. At the trembling. At the desperation. And I felt nothing. You're right, I said softly. I didn't nearly die from one mistake. She stopped crying. Her face lifted, hopeful. Then I finished. I died from 1,000 small ones. She crumpled to the floor, sobbing into her hands. I stepped away, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel obligated to pick her back up. Chapter 8, Zoe's Last Gambit. Recovery had steadied his hands, but not his heart. Every time he opened the blinds and let in the afternoon light, he felt a strange mix of clarity and exhaustion. His body was healing, his boundaries too. But Zoe, predictably, disastrously, was not finished. It started with a knock on his door. A courier stood there, holding a thick envelope stamped with urgent legal markings. Delivery for you, sir. Signature required. He signed, his pulse tightening. Documents like these never brought good news. He tore the envelope open at the kitchen counter. Pages slid out, dense, official, the type of paperwork that carried weight like lead. At the top, petition for temporary conservatorship. He didn't breathe for a moment. Zoe had filed in court claiming he was mentally incompetent after surgery, that he couldn't make rational decisions, that his choices over the last week were the result of post-operative confusion and emotional instability, that he needed her to manage his financial and medical decisions for his own safety. He barked out a laugh, sharp and humorless. She wants to take control of everything, he muttered. As if summoned, his phone buzzed, Zoe calling. He didn't answer. He couldn't stomach hearing the faux concern she always wielded like a weapon. But she didn't give up. A string of texts followed. Zoe, we need to talk. Zoe, you're not thinking clearly right now. Zoe, this isn't permanent. I just need to protect us until you're better. Protect us, he echoed. She means protect her access. He forwarded the documents to Gabriel. 5 minutes later, his phone rang. Gabriel didn't bother with pleasantries. She actually did it. Yep, he said. She really wants control more than she wants a marriage. There was a stiff exhale on the other end. I'll be there in an hour. In the meantime, don't respond to her. At all. He nodded, though Gabriel couldn't see it, and paced the living room until his chest ached. Not physically, emotionally. Betrayal had a unique weight, heavy and hollow at the same time. Gabriel arrived exactly 58 minutes later, briefcase in hand, expression dark. Let me guess, he said as he entered without preamble. She called you unstable, irrational, and unfit. and apparently suffering from surgery-related cognitive decline. He handed Gabriel the petition. Gabriel flipped through the pages, his jaw tightening. "This is disgusting. The court won't like this." "Will it work?" he asked quietly. Gabriel's eyes snapped up, fierce. "Absolutely not." He placed his briefcase on the table and clicked it open. Several folders were stacked inside, color-tabbed and immaculately organized. "These," Gabriel said, laying them out one by one, "will bury her petition before it even breathes." He handed over the first file. Medical reports. A stack of clean, authoritative assessment from his cardiologist and surgeon confirming his cognitive clarity, physical stability, and strong decision-making ability. Next, a second folder. Psychiatric evaluations. A full-length competency review done during his early recovery. The doctor's statement printed clear and bold. Patient is fully competent. Then a third folder. Documentation of every decision he made post-surgery. Timelines, email evidence, text logs, witness statements from nurses who had seen him alert and lucid. And finally, the thickest folder of all. "Here," Gabriel said, sliding it across the table, "is her downfall." Inside were screenshots. Hundreds. Zoe's own text messages with Dahlia and their mother, unearthed through cloud backups and voluntarily provided by a cousin who had grown sick of the family's toxicity. Screenshots that exposed Zoe's true thoughts. Messages mocking his hospital stay. Messages complaining that he was being dramatic. Messages outlining how she'd keep access to his accounts. And the worst one, the one Gabriel had highlighted in red. "If he gets smart, I'll just say he's unstable." He stared at the sentence for a long time. The letters seemed to burn through the page. "That's who she is," he said softly. "That's who she always was." Gabriel exhaled slowly. "This isn't care. It's coercion. And the judge will see it." Court was scheduled 2 days later. He sat beside Gabriel at the long wooden table, heart steady, not from confidence, but from exhaustion. The courtroom was cold, solemn, the kind of room that made dishonesty echo twice as loud. Zoe sat across from him. She was dressed in pale beige, minimal makeup, hair smoothed into a low bun, trying to look like the picture of a responsible guardian. Her eyes darted toward him, searching for pity, softness, something she could latch onto. She found nothing. When the judge entered, Zoe's attorney launched into a honeyed speech about medical trauma and post-operative confusion. He listened silently, watching Zoe dab her eyes with a tissue that remained perfectly dry. Then it was Gabriel's turn. He stood slowly, deliberately, and placed his folders on the bench. "Your Honor," he began, "my client is not incompetent. He is simply no longer willing to be manipulated, and we will provide proof." Gabriel submitted the documents, each one clean, factual, irrefutable. Medical evaluations, psychiatric assessments, dated communications. The courtroom grew still. Then he handed the judge the final file, the one with the screenshots. The judge's eyebrows lifted as he read. By the second page, his expression hardened. By the third, he removed his glasses entirely. He looked directly at Zoe. "Mrs. Lawson," he said sternly, "this," he held up the screenshot with her damning message, "is evidence of intentional deceit." Zoe's face drained of color. No, that's taken out of context." The judge slammed his folder shut. "Context or not, it is clear you have attempted to weaponize your husband's medical situation for personal gain." Her attorney stammered. "Your Honor, she was emotional." "Emotional is not a defense for manipulation," the judge snapped. "And filing for conservatorship under false pretenses is a serious offense." Tears finally spilled down Zoe's cheeks, not sorrow, but fear. The judge turned to him. "Mr. Lawson, your competence is not in question. This petition is hereby dismissed with prejudice. It cannot be refiled." He nodded once. Relief didn't wash over him. Instead, cold clarity did. The judge wasn't finished. "Mrs. Lawson, I strongly advise you to consider the gravity of your actions. Any further attempt to interfere with your husband's autonomy will not be tolerated." Zoe covered her mouth, sobbing, but he felt nothing. No sympathy, no ache, just an understanding, sharp and final. This wasn't a woman who made a mistake from panic. This wasn't a wife trying to protect her marriage. This was someone who would rather control him than care for him. And that realization cut deeper than the surgery ever had. Chapter 9. Choosing Himself. The ink on the divorce decree had barely dried when he felt a weight lift from his chest, heavier than the surgical stitches that had nearly killed him months earlier. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, the air heavy with procedural gravity, but he barely noticed it. His focus was singular. Freedom. Zoe had sat across from him, eyes red and raw, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her purse. She said nothing as the judge signed the papers, her lawyer making quiet, futile protests. Even the judge seemed impatient with her theatrics, tapping his pen and reminding everyone that the decision was final. Finally, the clerk slid the decree across the table. "It's over," she whispered to him, though her voice wavered between relief and fear. He nodded, silent, letting the words sink in. "Over," he repeated to himself like a mantra, feeling the finality in the syllables. Outside the courthouse, the air was crisp. Autumn had arrived, leaves swirling in shades of amber and gold. He walked to the car slowly, each step a meditation, a conscious acknowledgement that his life was now entirely his own. Gabriel fell in step beside him. "You okay?" Gabriel asked, cautious, protective. "I've never been more okay," he admitted, the sunlight warming his face. He didn't glance back at the courthouse, at Zoe, at the life he had left behind. There was nothing to see, nothing to reclaim. The next weeks were methodical. He liquidated the remaining shared properties, Zoe's favorite townhouse by the lake, the small cabin near his parents' hometown, even the vacation condo they had argued over endlessly. Each sale was deliberate, final. No calls from Zoe, no pleas, no negotiations. Just the soft click of the keyboard, the phone confirmation of transfers, the silence of a life being rebuilt. He canceled every joint service, returned keys and access cards, and ensured all accounts were completely severed. Every time he completed a task, he felt a small, satisfying release, like unclenching a fist he hadn't realized had been tight for years. Zoe tried, of course. Texts appeared intermittently. "Zoe, we can work this out. Please don't do this. Zoe, I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm sorry. Zoe, this isn't the way. You can't just erase us." He read each one and felt a strange sense of detachment. His heart, which had been fragile in the ICU, had grown steady again. His decisions were no longer reactive. They were deliberate, conscious acts of self-preservation. He typed nothing in response. No reply, no engagement, just silence. It was in this silence that he first considered the cabin. The idea had been there for weeks, a quiet place, far from the chaos, from Zoe, from the relentless reminders of a life he had endured. He pictured it, nestled in the Colorado mountains, pine-scented air, a small fire crackling in the hearth, nothing but the hum of nature and his own thoughts. The move was meticulous. He boxed only what he needed, leaving behind the trappings of a life he no longer wanted. The high-end furniture Zoe adored, the ornate decor, even the art that had been hers more than his. He left without a word, the finality deliberate. The plane ride west felt like crossing a line into a new life. Each mile east to west, a removal of old burdens. Arriving in Colorado, he stepped off the small regional plane into crisp mountain air that made his lungs ache in a way that was almost pleasurable, pure oxygen, untainted by city pollution, untainted by expectation. The cabin was modest, but perfect. Wide windows with views of snow-capped peaks, a stone fireplace, a small wooden porch that overlooked a valley dotted with pine trees. He opened the windows and let the silence fill the space, listening to the distant call of a hawk, the wind brushing the trees. He unpacked slowly, deliberately. Each item had a place. His books, his laptop, the journals he had kept during his recovery, photographs of trips he had taken alone or with friends before the marriage had grown heavy. He brewed coffee and sipped it on the porch, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. No heart monitor required. Gabriel called once just to check in. "You sure you don't want someone else with you?" "Company, I'm sure," he said. This is exactly what I need. Days turned into weeks. He hiked the trails near the cabin, each step carrying him further away from the old life. He wrote in his journal at dawn, journaled thoughts he had never dared to voice aloud. Fears, regrets, realizations about his marriage, and the quiet understanding that he was finally prioritizing himself. And then one evening, his phone buzzed. A single message appeared, small and hesitant. "Zoe, please don't leave. I'm sorry." He held the phone in his hands for a long moment. The mountains stretched endlessly behind him, the sun setting in a blaze of amber and rose. The air was cool, crisp, untouched by her presence. He could feel the pulse of his own heart, steady, calm, unburdened. He read the message again, her apology, her plea, and he did nothing. He set the phone down on the counter, watching it lie there silently, a reminder of what had been and what would never be again. For the first time in years, he felt a deep, unshakable peace. It wasn't closure given by someone else. It wasn't validation from a partner who had finally recognized his worth. It was the moment he finally chose himself, consciously and completely. The cabin was quiet except for the wind through the pines. He walked out to the porch, watching the last light fade over the mountains. The sun disappeared behind the peaks, leaving only the twilight and the sound of his own steady breath. No messages, no calls, no distractions. Just him. He smiled softly, a full smile that had been buried under years of neglect and manipulation. His chest, once broken both literally and figuratively, felt lighter. The mountains didn't judge. The air didn't demand anything of him. The silence didn't criticize. And for the first time, he realized that peace wasn't something given. It was something chosen. He chose it now. And for the first time in a long time, it was entirely his. Chapter 10, Closure. The cabin was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt almost sacred. Snow had begun to dust the pine trees, coating the branches in a soft, pristine white. He sat at the rustic wooden desk in the corner of the cabin, a warm cup of coffee steaming beside him, the mountains visible through the wide window behind him. His laptop hummed softly, and the cursor blinked, impatient, waiting for words that had been forming in his mind for weeks. He took a deep breath and typed the title first. When Your Wife Chooses Paint Over You. His fingers hesitated over the keys, then began moving faster, pouring the truth he had held inside for so long. He wrote about the collapse, the ICU, the loneliness, the phone calls that went unanswered, about the voicemail that revealed the absurdity of priorities that had haunted him for years, about the betrayal, the lawyer, the legal battles, and the moment he realized he was the only one standing up for his life. He wrote about Zoe's absences, her manipulation, her sister's meltdown over a shade of paint, and 1,000 small moments that had compounded into a life-threatening pattern of neglect. He wrote about the pain of finally seeing the truth in full light, the clarity that came only from facing mortality and betrayal simultaneously. His hands trembled at times, and he paused to breathe, letting the steam from his coffee blur his vision. The words weren't just therapy, they were a testimony, a declaration that he had survived, and more importantly, that he had chosen himself. As he wrote, he reflected on every step he had taken to reclaim his life. The sales, the closures, the dismantling of everything she had taken for granted. He remembered the way Gabriel had quietly stood by him in court, the judge's gavel echoing like a drum in his chest, the suffocating silence after Dahlia's iced coffee attack, and the liberating weight that left his shoulders when Zoe finally had no more legal or emotional leverage over him. He typed each sentence deliberately, allowing the raw honesty to flow. He described the liberation of making boundaries, of severing ties that had suffocated him for years. He described the quiet moments in Colorado, the snow-dusted mornings, the long walks through pine-scented trails, the warmth of the fire as he journaled and reflected. By the time he reached the conclusion, the first layer of his chest had felt lighter, but the final layer, the release that comes only when truth is expressed, was yet to settle. He paused, reading back the final lines. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's the moment you finally choose yourself. He stared at the sentence for a long moment, letting it sink in. Every heartbeat, every step, every hard decision, every refusal to respond to Zoe's pleas had led him here. He hesitated only for a second before hitting publish. The click was barely audible, but it felt monumental. The words went out into the world, raw, unpolished, unflinching. There was no shame in it, no apology. Only the story of a man who had almost died and had refused to be ignored. Minutes passed, then hours. Notifications began trickling in. Comments, shares, and messages that were first sparse, then increasingly numerous. He scrolled through the responses, disbelief mingled with a growing sense of validation. This is exactly what I needed to read. My spouse ignored me through my illness too. Thank you for putting words to what I've felt for years. I'm not alone. I was gaslit constantly, and it took me a health scare to finally see the truth. You inspired me. Tears filled his eyes, but they weren't sorrow, they were relief. Thousands of strangers were reaching out with their own stories, sharing their experiences of being minimized, replaced, or abandoned. He wasn't just telling his story, he was giving others permission to see their own truths, to reclaim themselves. His phone buzzed intermittently with new messages and notifications, some from old friends, some from people he had never met. Each message, each share, felt like a small spark igniting a larger flame, a movement he hadn't intended, yet one he had catalyzed by simply choosing to speak honestly. Gabriel called, checking in. I saw your post. You're trending. People are really resonating with it. He smiled, a full, deep smile, the kind that had been absent for years. I never expected this, he admitted. I just wanted to finally say it. Gabriel chuckled softly. Well, you did, and it's bigger than either of us could have imagined. He leaned back in his chair, stretching, allowing the mountains and the silence to settle around him. The sun was dipping below the peaks, casting the cabin in a warm, golden glow. He thought of the journey that had brought him here. The hospital bed, the lawyer, the restraining order, the divorce, the cabin, and now this, the story that mattered as much to him as it might matter to thousands of strangers. There was no fear, no anticipation, no lingering bitterness. Zoe's last message, her plea, her apology, still sat unread in his inbox. Please don't leave. I'm sorry. He picked up his phone, read it once more, and set it back down without a reply. No words were needed. His choice had been made long before her message arrived. The past could not demand a response from someone who had reclaimed themselves. Instead, he opened the window and let the cool mountain air wash over his face. The scent of pine was crisp, the sky turning violet with dusk. He walked onto the porch, coffee in hand, and let the silence wrap around him like a protective blanket. The wind whispered through the trees, and for the first time in years, the world felt steady beneath his feet. The article continued to gain traction online. People commented, shared, and tagged their friends. Messages arrived in languages he didn't speak, from corners of the world he had never been. But he didn't check them obsessively. He didn't need validation. He had already chosen himself, and that was enough. Night fell. The cabin was bathed in moonlight, and the fire crackled warmly. He sat on the porch, staring at the snow-dusted peaks and the shadows dancing between the trees. For the first time, he allowed himself to truly breathe, not the shallow, anxious breaths he had taken for years, worrying about Zoe's moods, her priorities, her whims, but deep, unguarded breaths that filled his lungs completely, bringing life back into places he had thought long dead. The peace was absolute, quiet, solid, complete. He thought back to the ICU, to the moment when he realized he could choose to protect himself, to put his life first, to finally prioritize his own health and well-being over someone who had never truly cared. That realization had guided every step since, and it had led him here. No guilt, no regret, only clarity, only freedom. He took one last sip of his coffee, letting the warmth spread through him. The mountains stood silent, eternal witnesses to the life he had reclaimed. The article had gone viral, thousands had seen it, but it was not about recognition anymore. It was about affirmation, self-affirmation, hard-earned and unshakable. He closed his laptop, setting it aside. He leaned back in the wooden chair, hands clasped, eyes closed. The wind through the pines whispered like a lullaby, and the soft glow of moonlight settled on his face. For the first time in years, he truly breathed.